Right. So I am program manager for a program called Our Water, Our World, which is a program designed to bring awareness between pesticides and water quality. We are IPM educators that work with the general public every single day, talking to you about how we reduce pesticides, solve pest problems for long-term results and for sustainability. And what we're going to learn today are the principles of how to garden less toxically, how your garden is a dynamic ecosystem, and why working with IPM, with an IPM approach, equals less pests. Pests, not pets. So what is IPM? It's actually integrated pest management. And what integrated pest management is a way we solve pest problems in the professional garden industry. So we're going to look at the system as a whole. So that would be your garden, it could be your home, but we're going to focus on garden today. And we're going to understand all of the diversities of that garden. And when we have a problem, it's usually an indicator or symptoms. Our garden shows us signs when something might be out of balance. And that's when we really want to hone in and look at what that problem might be. And then we decide, can we live with it? Because oftentimes we understand that the balance in the garden is going to adjust itself and take over and correct itself. However, if it's a situation we can't live with, then we need to take some action. And those actions are going to be either cultural controls, mechanical controls, biological controls, or chemical controls. Now in this case, chemical controls, I'm referring to eco-friendly pesticides, but I still am going to encourage all of us to reduce the use of eco-friendly pesticides, because guess what? We can garden and we can grow beautiful food without pesticides, but we still need to use them on occasion. And then in the event that the plant really just isn't working and it's always struck with some type of a problem, give yourself permission to just remove it. It's that simple. So let's dive into some of these. So cultural controls. I like to consider this to be the health of the garden or the health of the environment. So when we spend a lot of time and energy increasing the health of the garden, guess what? We're reducing pest problems. It starts with the soil. So we've already heard a lot of really great stories about how important soil is. I'd like to share that every single one of our gardens is going to be different than the other person's. We live in this really dynamic Bay Area where we're faced with a lot of different microclimates and a lot of different types of soil. So have an idea of what kind of soil you have is going to help you identify how we're going to water, because yes, most of us are going to overwater, and some of us are even going to underwater. So when we can, and watering is actually, incorrect watering is the #1 reason why plants fail. So when we understand what type of soil we have, it's going to help us later when we then go to try to water our plants, irrigate them, or fertilize them, or grow different types of varieties. And then from there, we want to build healthy soils. We want to inoculate the soils with microbiology, with beneficial bacteria and beneficial fungi. We want to add soil amendment or compost. If we don't have luxury of creating compost on site, we can buy really good quality compost at our local retail markets. It's also going to be called soil amendment or planting mix. These are all going to be similar things that are going to equate to compost. Please read the bags if we are buying bag material, because the list of ingredients is going to be on the bag, and many of our local soils, bag products that we're getting are OMRI certified and also CBFA. So these are organic certifications that we can see on the bags. We want to work with organic fertilizers, and we've heard that a couple times already also. The reason why we want to work with organic fertilizers is because it's actually supporting the microbiology that's in the soil. We really want to get off those synthetic fertilizers, anything that we add water to that turns blue. We really want to just be away with it. I know we sometimes still have that little arsenal in the corner of the pantry that's hidden behind the organics just so no one sees it. But understand that synthetic fertilizers, one thing that makes them fast acting is that they're high in salts. Salts are detrimental to our soils. So over time, the plants might look fantastic and we might get a lot of blooms and it's going to be dynamic, but over time it's not going to be sustainable for our gardens or for our soils. Another thing that synthetic fertilizers do is they kind of act like steroids, and they push a lot of new growth that's full of sugars. And guess what likes to eat sugary, sweet new growth? Insects. Not just aphids, but all of those insects we're going to see in the garden that are problems. So when we can reduce and eliminate synthetic fertilizers and focus on organic fertilizers, and let me tell you, there are so many beautiful, high-quality organic fertilizers around all of the retail markets. There's really no reason why we shouldn't be using them, but we're going to be able to bolster the health of our plants. And when we have healthy plants, they're able to withstand a lot of stresses during times of maybe drought or times of, I don't know, other things that could be happening in the garden. So, and then mulch. Okay, mulch is also going to be really fantastic. We want to protect our soils, okay? And the way we do it is by adding mulch. We don't have to mulch the entire garden. In fact, it's recommended that a section of the garden stays raw and uncultivated to attract and promote the habitat for native bees that are ground dwellers and such. But it is nice in the areas of our garden that we are really actively working through is to mulch the areas. It's going to protect the soil as mulch decomposes. It's adding organic matter to the soil, which is a win-win. And then I'll share that mulch is going to keep the soil cool in the summer and warm in the winter. Unless you live in San Francisco, then it's the opposite. And then we're going to also know that mulch can provide some habitat for some of our beneficial insects, especially if it's the chunky arbor mulch. And then of course it reduces water evaporation rate. We're going to reduce water evaporation rate by over 70% by mulch, adding a layer of mulch in the garden, which equates to a 30% water savings on the outdoor water usage of the water bill. So it is really fantastic. It's a win-win. And something I forgot to mention about compost, or when we amend the soil, no matter what type of soil we have, if it's the sandy soil, if it's the clay soil, if it's anything cruddy in between, even beautiful loamy soil, compost corrects every situation. So if we want to increase the health of our soil, we're always going to have compost. I forgot to mention that. Okay, this is kind of cool. So when we're adding compost to our soils or inoculating it with like mycorrhizal fungi or organic fertilizers now have a lot of organic or beneficial bacteria and fungi in the mixes, this is what we're creating. We're actually, I like to call the beneficial bacteria and fungi the nutrient transport enhancement systems, because they are actually working with the root systems of our plants. There's a symbiotic relationship that occurs that helps break down toxins and pollutants, holds the soil together, but then also allows for better nutrient uptake and water uptake. So how many of us like to, I'm assuming, how many of us will plant fava beans in the gardens as like a cover crop? Okay, awesome. Aren't they fantastic? So I'm a huge fan of fava beans. And not only are they fantastic for increasing the health of the soil and adding nitrogen to the soil, but as they start to grow, guess what? How many of us actually eat the tips of the fava beans? Yes, aren't they delicious, sauteed with some garlic and sesame oil? I just love them. But if we are using, or if we're growing fava beans as a cover crop to support the structure and health of the soil, we do want to make sure before they go full-blown flower stage, we want to cut them at the base of the soil so that nitrogen-fixed bacteria stays in the soil. If we let it go to seed and grow the bean, which we'll want to, maybe some of the plants will want to grow the beans so we have them for the next session, understand that all that nitrogen will come up through the soil, through the root system, into that plant to create that bean. So just so you know, not a lot of people consider that, so I just like to point that out. And then on this side we have a root system. It's actually that kind of darker tan is the main, like the T in the middle, in the top. That was the original root of this plant. And with the mycorrhizal fungi, it has grown this nice network of webbing around and beyond the root system, kind of creating a bottle brush. This allows for more nutrient uptake and more water uptake. So this is actually going to be beneficial for those times when we are possibly moving into a drier season, maybe a drought. It's going to help our plants stay very hydrated. Okay, from there we want to plant the right plant in the right place. So we've heard a lot about native plants, California native plants. I also support Mediterranean native plants that are going to work well in our environments, that are not going to be invasive in any way. But understand, I'll just share. For most of my adult life, I lived in San Francisco, and I sadly just had a little concrete pad between two very tall buildings of the apartments. And so even though I just wanted to have some sun in the ground to grow some beautiful sun-loving plants, I became an expert at shade container gardening. So we have to work with what we've got, because if we don't, we're going to just invite other problems. So I'm all for pushing limits, but understand that when we push limits, we could be also faced with maybe some disease problems or some more some insect problems, because the plant could be stressed. And then of course, if we want to try to correct that problem, if we are not planting the right plant in the right place, if we want to try to correct that problem, then we'll have to go to a pesticide. So if we want to avoid using pesticides altogether, and we want to create a healthy, happy, biodiverse habitat in our gardens, then always focus on planting the right plant in the right place. Now sometimes the neighbors will grow some trees that when we moved in or when we started our garden, there was a nice sunny area, but over time, all of a sudden now our sunny area is shaded. That happens. Sadly, then we have to adjust to that situation, and yeah, we have to always be kind of looking at our gardens in new ways, new lights, and make the changes that are needed, and kind of move with the times. Growing biodiversity to support pollinators and beneficial insects. So these are just a couple of plant lists that I like to reference. I'm sure you're familiar with at least the first two. How many of you are familiar with BASCA, the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency? I know no one knows about it. It's kind of cool. But they have, I mean, it's kind of cool program or a resource, but no one knows about it, which is